They're going at it again, and this time the RTX 4080 is here to prove that its ray tracing performance is why it deserves to cost over 1/3 more than the RX 7900 XT. Now let's see if it can live up to that claim. Here to try and prove itself in round 2, we have the Zotac Gaming RTX 4080 in the green corner, and in the red corner we have the Sapphire Pulse RX 7900 XT. If you missed round 1, you can check it out here. We'll be taking these two cards through our ray tracing gauntlets to see if they can cut it, and if they can't, then DLSS and FSR will swoop in to try and save the day. These cards will be tested at our 4 resolutions, those being 4K Ultrawide, 1440p Super Ultrawide, 1600p Ultrawide, and 1440p Ultrawide. Everything will be tested on my test bench featuring an AMD R7 5800X 3D with 32GB of 3200Hz CL14 memory, running on Windows 11 with the latest AMD and Nvidia drivers. Now, let's see which card can prove to be worth its cost. Our first game is Forza Horizon 5, running at its extreme preset with extreme ray tracing. We see very good performance for both cards, with raw ray tracing scores staying closer to raster performance, thanks to some smartly implemented ray tracing that ray traces only the player car, providing maximum impact for minimal performance costs. Here at 4K Ultrawide, we see both cards' raw ray tracing scores stay within 11% of their raster performance, with both providing playable frame rates. The RTX 4080 holds a 30% frame rate lead, keeping its 1% low above 60 at a comfortable 67 FPS, while the 7900 drops to acceptable territory with a 52 FPS. When we turn on the upscalers, we see DLSS quality deliver above raster performance at 91 FPS, an 11% performance difference compared to FSR Quality's 5% improvement, delivering a 91 FPS average and a 66 FPS 1% low. At this resolution, the 4080 provides a 38% performance advantage. Going to our Super Ultrawide, we see more near raster performance, with both cards 9% off of the raster performance, with the 4080 delivering 96 FPS and entering high refresh rate territory, and the 7900 XT delivering 74 FPS. The 4080 sees its 1% lows improve to 48 FPS, coming closer to matching the raster performance than we saw at 4K. We however see the 7900 XT's 1% lows stay stagnant at 52 FPS. When switching on the upscaling tech, we see the average for the 4080 improve to 102 FPS, a mere 7% improvement, but the 1% lows stay stagnant at 84 FPS. As for the 7900 XT, FSR provides no improvement to either average or 1% low. The 4080 is providing the same performance advantage we saw at 4K. At 1600p Ultrawide, again we see a 9% performance advantage, or less, for our two cards from the raster performance, with the 4080 coming in at 103 FPS, and the 7900 XT coming in at 80 FPS, with the 4080's 1% low nearly stagnant, only improving 1 FPS to 85, while the 7900 XT finally clears the 60 FPS line. Our upscaling provides minor improvements, with DLSS delivering 110 FPS average and an 88 FPS 1% low, and the FSR once again providing no improvement. At this resolution, the RTX 4080 provides a 29% RT advantage and a 38% upscaling advantage. Our 1440p ultrawide resolution sees another small improvement to our FPS, with the 4080 delivering 111 FPS and the 7900 XT delivering 83 FPS, with 1% lows of 89 and 62 FPS respectively. With our upscaling on, we see a meager improvement for the DLSS average, and its 1% low actually regresses from just ray tracing results, while the FSR again does pretty much nothing, providing 1 more FPS to the average and nothing for the 1% low. This game sees very good ray tracing performance, with all resolutions playable on both cards, though a case could be made for needing the RTX 4080 at the 4K ultrawide and super ultrawide resolutions. RX 7900 XT owners can just run high settings with extreme ray tracing to get over 100 FPS at all resolutions. That said, with a 30% raw ray tracing advantage, the 4080 is delivering on its MSRP difference. While the DLSS advantage is 38%, I don't think either card should be using upscaling techniques, as preserving the crisp lines of the car at native resolution is more important than the meager performance gain. Now, let's see if Hitman can produce for the 4080. Hitman 3 will be tested at ultra settings, with ray trace reflections and ray trace sun shadows turned on. Right off the bat, we see both cards suffer an absolutely brutal reduction from raster. At 4K, the 4080 loses nearly 3/4 of its frame rate, dropping down from 100 FPS to only 28 FPS, with the 7900 XT getting hit even worse, dropping from 82 down to 17 FPS, leaving both cards completely unplayable. When we turn on our upscaling, we see DLSS doing nothing across all resolutions, but luckily for the 4080, it can use FSR, and the gains are tremendous. With FSR quality settings on, the 4080 delivers a 71% improvement, making it to acceptable territory for the average at 48 FPS, with the 1% low still dipping into unacceptable territory. While the 7900 XT, despite FSR quality settings providing a 76% improvement, is still stuck in unacceptable territory. Neither card is providing a frame rate I would want to play at, but with the 4080 you could at least give it a go, as it provides 60% more performance with FSR than AMD gets with FSR. When we go super ultrawide, we see a decent jump in performance for both cards, but the 4080 is still providing unacceptable performance at 41 FPS, and the 7900 XT is unplayable at 25 FPS. Upscaling delivers big again, and the 4080 finally gets to playable frame rates, thanks to a 56% performance boost from FSR quality, getting its average into smooth gameplay range, with 64 FPS, and its 1% low staying in acceptable territory at 48 FPS. Despite the 7900 XT getting a 60% improvement, its frame rate stays in unacceptable range, with 40 FPS and unplayable 1% lows at 25 FPS. The 4080 stays 60% ahead of the 7900 XT at this resolution. At 1600p ultrawide, we see a rather disappointing performance improvement for the 4080, seeing only a 4 FPS improvement, which gets its average to the acceptable line at 45 FPS, but still leaves its 1% low in unacceptable territory. And the 7900 XT is still stuck completely in unplayable land. FSR gets the 4080 to 70 FPS average, but the 1% low is stagnant, the same way that the raster 1% low became stagnant for the 4080 on all resolutions below 4K ultrawide, meaning that it can never achieve a smooth gameplay experience with ray tracing. The 7900 XT hasn't hit any limits yet, but it's still so far behind the 4080 at 44 FPS that the 4080 doesn't even need to worry. And at our speediest resolution of 1440p ultrawide, we see the 4080 still in acceptable range with a 52 FPS average and a 1% low in an unacceptable range at 42 FPS. The 7900 XT finally makes it out of unplayable to unacceptable with its average FPS of 33. With FSR on, the 4080 gets to 79 FPS, which would be nice if its 1% low wasn't stuck at 48. Once again, the 7900 XT is trailing by a 58% margin, delivering only 50 FPS, getting it to acceptable range for the first time, and its 1% low making it to unacceptable for the first time at 32 FPS. Hitman 3 is a ray tracing disaster for both cards. The visual upgrade is just not worth the tremendous downgrade in performance, even with a crushing 59% advantage for the 4080 in this title, easily justifying its price difference. It's a hollow victory, because I can't recommend anyone play Hitman 3 with ray tracing turned on. Let's see if Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxies can give us something to work with. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is being tested at the Ultra preset, with ray traced reflections set to Ultra and transparent reflections turned on. Here we thankfully see a much better experience than Hitman 3. At 4K ultrawide, we are starting with the same level of performance it ended with in Hitman 3, with the 4080 delivering 51 FPS average and a 1% low of 39 FPS, and the 7900 XT delivering 31 FPS average and a 19 FPS 1% low. With DLSS quality turned on, the 4080 gains 71% performance, and both its average and 1% low get into smooth gameplay territory, with 87 and 68 FPS respectively. With FSR on, the 7900 XT makes it to acceptable range with its average, but its 1% low is having a rough time, stuck in unplayable at 28 FPS. Our super ultrawide is getting some pretty playable raw raster numbers from the 4080, with it delivering 70 FPS average and a 1% low of 55. And when DLSS is turned on, it's flying, with 114 FPS average and an 88 FPS 1% low, almost making it completely into high refresh rate territory. The 7900 XT isn't doing quite so well. It's having the same poor 1% low performance that we saw with its raster results when FSR is turned on, delivering nearly 60 FPS for the average, but with a 1% low nearly half that. and its raw ray tracing is stuck in unacceptable territory with unplayable 1% lows. The 1600p results are flying for the 4080, with its ray trace only average and 1% lows getting smooth gameplay with 83 and 63 FPS respectively. The DLSS results have hit very high refresh rates with an average of 131 FPS, and its 1% lows are over the high refresh rate line at 98 FPS. The 7900 XT has gotten over the acceptable line with a 51 FPS average, but just can't drag its 1% low with it, leaving it stuck in unplayable territory. FSR gets the average into smooth gameplay at 70 FPS, but the 1% low is languishing at just 37 FPS. Finally, at 1440p, the 4080 has taken off, with even the ray trace only performance hitting high refresh rates of 99 and 75 FPS for its 1% lows. And with DLSS on, you're well into very high refresh rate at 151 FPS, and 1% lows stay fast at 110 FPS. The 7900 XT would be delivering what is a very fine result if they could fix their 1% lows, with their ray tracing average at 60 FPS and their FSR average at 82 FPS. This game is an unequivocal win for the 4080, delivering 65% more ray trace performance and 88% more upscaling performance. Anyone with a 4080 should just be playing this game with ray tracing and DLSS quality turned on. Even with the performance advantage the 4080 has, if AMD could fix the 1% low issue in this game, I could easily recommend 7900 XT owners ray trace at 1600p and 1440p ultrawide resolutions. Maybe AMD will have more luck in Shadows of the Tomb Raider. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is one of the first games to employ ray tracing effects, and it's a great way to see how far we've come with ray tracing capabilities. It will be played at its highest preset with ray traced shadows on Ultra. At 4K we actually see one of our closer battles in the raw ray tracing department, with the 4080 delivering 61 FPS average and a 48 FPS 1% low to the 7900 XT's 47 FPS average and 37 FPS 1% low. Only a 30% advantage for Nvidia. Once we get to our upscaling, things fall heavily in Nvidia's favor, because this game has no FSR, only XeSS for the 7900 XT to use. Meaning, while the 4080 is getting a 54% boost from DLSS quality, bringing it up to a better than raster 94 FPS average and a 75 FPS 1% low, the 7900 XT is only getting a 15% boost from XeSS Ultra quality to a 55 FPS average with a 45 FPS 1% low. On our super ultra-wide resolution, we see our 4080's ray tracing performance get a very smooth 84 FPS average and a 66 FPS 1% low, while our 7900 XT also manages a smooth 66 FPS average, but 1% lows that are still only acceptable at 53 FPS. DLSS once again delivers, with the average performance getting to a very high refresh rate, with 121 FPS, but its 1% low is starting to lag behind a bit, at 88 FPS. XeSS is only squeaking out a 9% advantage for the 7900 XT, getting both the average and 1% low into smooth gameplay territory, with 72 and 61 FPS respectively. At 1600p, the 4080's ray tracing hits high refresh rates, with a 97 FPS average and a 74 FPS 1% low, and the 7900 XT gets its ray tracing results completely into the smooth range, with a 78 FPS average and a 60 FPS 1% low. DLSS continues its climb to 136 FPS, with a 98 FPS 1% low, while XeSS delivers another single-digit result for a barely mentionable 5 and 3 FPS increase. Lastly, at 1440p ultrawide, we almost don't need to bother with upscaling anymore, as both cards are delivering RT performance that is great for this type of game, with the 4080 delivering 110 FPS average and an 83 FPS 1% low. And joining it in high refresh rate land is the 7900 XT, with a 90 FPS average and a 69 FPS 1% low. DLSS does provide a significant boost to average frame rate at 146 FPS, but with its 1% lows now 50 FPS lower, you may lack the desired smoothness that you would expect on a high refresh rate monitor. XeSS is again barely doing more than nothing for the 7900 XT, with another 5 and 3 FPS uplift. With only a 26% raw raster increase, the 7900 XT might have been able to make the 4080 sweat in this game, if it supported FSR, but alas it does not. and XeSS is a poor replacement, not even able to deliver double-digit gains at most of our resolutions, leaving the 4080 with a commanding 65% advantage with DLSS on, making it an easy recommendation for turning ray tracing on in this game. Even the 7900 XT, I would say the raw ray tracing is going to give you a very nice experience at 1600p and 1440p. Now, let's see how these cards handle the poster child for ray tracing, Cyberpunk 2077. Lastly in our lineup we have Cyberpunk 2077, played at its Ultra Ray Tracing preset. Let's see if either of these cards can ray trace this game. At 4K Ultrawide we see both our cards' ray tracing performance down at unplayable levels. Deploying our upscaling we see that DLSS quality improves the 4080's frame rate 91% to achieve unacceptable levels of performance with a 42 FPS average and a 34 FPS 1% low, which is only 9% slower than its raster results. Sadly, FSR quality was not able to rescue the 7900 XT from unplayable territory, coming in at 25 FPS, 58% lower than the raster performance. Despite FSR doubling its frame rate, our super ultra-wide resolution allows the 4080's RT performance to eke out of unplayable territory with a 32 FPS average, but the 7900 XT is still stuck down there at 18 FPS. DLSS does get both the average and the 1% low into acceptable range at 57 and 46 FPS respectively, though it does lose ground to the raster results, being 19% slower. FSR gets the 7900 XT to unacceptable frame rates at 34 FPS. The 7900 XT does gain on its raster results, being only 53% slower. At 1600p we see our raw ray tracing results stay low at 38 FPS for the 4080 and 22 FPS for the 7900 XT, with DLSS delivering what would be its first real playable frame rates, with 66 FPS average and a 1% low of 53 FPS. A tight frame rate variance that should provide a pretty good experience. FSR still can't perform miracles, and the 7900 XT's FPS is stuck in unacceptable range at 39 FPS. Finally, at 1440p we see the ray tracing performance of the 4080 get to an acceptable average at 45 FPS, with 1% low still down at 37. The 7900 XT still can't get itself out of unplayable gameplay territory, delivering only 26 FPS. DLSS almost gets the 4080's 1% low to 60, while its average is at a smooth 77 FPS. FSR gets an achievement of its own, getting the 7900 XT to 46 FPS, entering an acceptable range, with its 1% lows down at 37 FPS, still in unacceptable territory. Cyberpunk is just a brutal title for these cards, limiting even the 4080 to 2 playable resolutions. But this is the only game where I feel RT effects are dazzling enough to step down to balanced FSR and DLSS presets before changing any of the other in-game settings, which should allow super ultrawide and lower resolutions to have smooth gameplay experience on the 4080, and for the 7900 XT to be playable at 1440p ultrawide. Now, let's see how the 4080 makes out in our 5-game average. Now putting all these benchmarks together and averaging them out, we see that at 4K ultrawide, even the mighty 4080 can't get good playable frame rate with just its ray tracing chops, with its average frame rate coming in at 49 FPS, and its 1% lows dipping into the 30s at 39 FPS. But this is miles better than the 7900 XT, which has some pretty unplayable frame rates, delivering only 34 FPS for the average and 26 FPS for its 1% low. With our AI upscaling quality modes turned on, we see that 4080 deliver a quite playable 72 FPS average, with 1% lows only dipping down to 57 FPS, on the higher end of the acceptable territory, while the 7900 XT wasn't even able to match the 4080's unenhanced performance, delivering only 44 FPS average and a 33 FPS 1% low, for an unacceptable gameplay experience, which gives the 4080 a 43% performance advantage for just RT, and a 63% advantage when upscaling. On our super ultrawide, we see our 4080 able to provide reasonable playable experience with just its ray tracing performance, coming in at 65 FPS average and 53 FPS 1% low, while the 7900 XT is still providing a poor play experience with 45 FPS average and 32 FPS 1% low. With our AI upscaling quality settings turned on, we see that the RTX 4080 actually averages a high refresh rate experience with a 92 FPS average and a 71 FPS 1% low. The 7900 XT, however, doesn't manage to get its average out of acceptable range, at just 56 FPS and its 1% low stuck in an unacceptable at 40 FPS, giving the RTX 4080 a 44% RT advantage and a 65% upscaling advantage. At 1600p we have the 4080 reaching 73 FPS average for RT performance and a 58 FPS 1% low, providing a playable experience, while the 7900 XT is providing a 52 FPS average and a 37 FPS 1% low, still providing a poor play experience. With our AI upscaling quality settings on, we see the 4080 still in high refresh rates, with 103 FPS average, and offering 1% lows of 77 FPS. The 7900 XT finally clears the 60 FPS line to deliver 63 FPS, but its 1% low is still outside of the acceptable range at 44 FPS, providing a playable experience but not necessarily a good one. These results give the 4080 a 42% RT advantage and a 62% upscaling advantage. At our final resolution of 1440p ultrawide, we see the RTX 4080 providing a good gaming experience with its RT performance delivering 83 FPS average and a 65 FPS 1% low. The 7900 XT is almost at playable frame rates with a 58 FPS average and a 42 FPS 1% low. When we look at what our AI upscaling quality settings provide, we see that the 4080 delivering a high refresh rate gaming experience with its average at 114 FPS and its 1% low at 80 FPS. The 7900 XT is finally providing a fine play experience with its average and smooth gameplay at 71 FPS and its 1% low in the acceptable range at 49 FPS. At our final resolution, our 4080 is seeing an RT advantage of 43% and an upscaling advantage of 59%. Across all resolutions, the RTX 4080 is seeing a 42% RT advantage and a 62% upscaling advantage over the RX 7900 XT. Let's see how this plays out in our price to performance graph. At MSRP, we see the RTX 4080 provide better price to performance at every resolution, with an average of $1.33 cheaper per frame than the RX 7900 XT. 7900 XT owners will be paying 112% more per ray traced frame than they did for raster frames, whereas the 4080 owners pays only 72% more per ray traced frame than they do for their raster frames. Even with the RTX 4080, it's costing you a lot more to ray trace than it does to play raster. When we look at our upscaling performance, we see a further advantage for the 4080, with it now costing $2.82 less per frame. Now, when we look at upscaling results with current pricing, which is determined by the low bar of having 2 or more cards at that price and in stock, we actually see that the RTX 4080 is $30 cheaper than when we did our raster head-to-head, and the 7900 XT is still widely available at MSRP. With the 4080 now coming in at $1,269, it still leaves it in a better price-to-performance position than the 7900 XT, now offering an average savings of $2.06 per frame. So, has the RTX 4080 earned its place thanks to ray tracing? The RTX 4080 easily earns its keep in our ray tracing benchmarks against the 7900 XT. Not only does it have better price performance, but it actually makes ray tracing viable at resolutions above 1440p ultrawide. Now, the 4080 is not cheap. You can even say that we're being overcharged for it. But it is the most accessible card where you can turn up ray tracing and still expect to have a good gameplay in most games. Now, the 7900 XT is a great raster card, but with only situational ray tracing opportunities. Even with the RTX 4080, there's going to be some ray tracing experience that just aren't worth the cost. The perfect example being Hitman 3. The visuals you're getting from that game are in no way worth the performance cost that you're having to pay, especially when games like Cyberpunk 2077 are able to provide way higher levels of visual quality with ray tracing, while costing less of a performance hit from your raster. I hope as ray tracing becomes more mainstream that we see less of these poor performance and we see more smart implementations like Forza Horizon 5 that allow the average gamer to experience the spectacle of ray tracing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was useful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe. That way you can catch our upcoming 7900 XTX review. And if you have any ideas for this channel, please leave them in the comments below. All the products we talked about in this video are in the description below. Thank you so much and have a great day.